Almost. Here we go. Welcome back to our virtual stage series, our WP Speakers Post Status Virtual Stage. And I had the distinct pleasure of listening to this talk at Color Code in Buffalo on this past Saturday. And I was like, okay, Christian, I don't have anybody scheduled for this Tuesday. You've got to come and do this talk for us over there. So let me tell you a little bit about today's talk is Content That Converts, a beginner's guide to compelling product stories. Unlock the power of product content to drive sales. This beginner-friendly talk provides product owners with the essential tools and techniques to craft compelling narratives that resonate with target customers on social media. Move beyond basic tutorials and discover how engaging video content can significantly boost your conversion rates and build a thriving online community. Learn proven strategies for platforms like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and more. And our presenter is Christian Taylor. Christian's a YouTuber, entrepreneur, and content creator from Nashville, Tennessee. His YouTube channel, Crayler Made, I love that, by the way. That's really clever.
Thank you.
Features content about online tech and entrepreneurship. Christian is passionate about sharing honest and easy to digest info with his audience of over 50,000 subscribers. I'm one of your new subscribers as of last Saturday. So
thank you.
50,001. I don't know. Just kidding. So I'm excited to have you here. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. I'll bring up your slides here, but take myself out of it, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, thanks for the intro. That was wonderful.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to share today about content that converts and how you can create compelling product stories for your product or service that you are selling. So, a little bit of background about myself. Michelle did an amazing intro already, but I've been creating YouTube videos for 14 years. I started with what I thought were comedy skits. I go back now and watch them, 10-year-old me, and I'm like, wow, that's really cringe. This isn't even funny. But 10-year-old me thought they were hilarious. Eventually, I discovered my interest for tech. So I pivoted to reviewing phones and accessories. If you know Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD on YouTube, or Linus Tech Tips, Austin Evans, I wanted to be the next tech YouTuber like that. So I built a technical expertise. I've also had an interest in web design from a young age. So I remember playing around with Wix and Squarespace and eventually discovering WordPress. And while this was happening, I wanted to make a video on the best place to buy a domain name because I was legitimately curious. And I thought, nobody's going to watch this video. Why would I make this? Like, someone who's going to watch an iPhone review has no interest in whether GoDaddy or Namecheap or Porkbun is the best place to buy a domain. But I did that anyway. And I'll get into that more later. I'm remembering that my next slides have some more context on that. But at some point, I pivoted to SaaS content. And then I was able to go full time as a content creator in 2020. And I'm going to share a very interesting fact about one specific video in the next few slides. So let's go forward here. So a little bit of my content journey. 2012, this is when I started my channel. I wasn't quite bold enough to feature one of my comedy skits. They're too cringe for that. But this is still pretty cringe. You can see 10-year-old me in the frame. I know. Oops. Hit the space bar. Yeah, I know. But you can see in 2012, I was already doing tech content. This was a Mac versus Windows video. In 2013, I went through a gaming era. So I did kind of simplify that last slide. I've gone through a lot of eras on YouTube. I do remember one where I was really into GoPros and the accessories, all the mounts. So that's a whole phase. If you scroll back and look on my channel. And by the way, all these videos I'm pointing out are public. So if you want to see what this video looks like, just saying. But yeah, I went through the Minecraft gaming era. 2016, that's really when I got serious about the tech content. So here you can see an accessory video I made. Now, 2017, this is when that interesting kind of unusual video was made. And I remember thinking, nobody is going to want to watch this. Why am I making this? But it was a passion project, something that I was genuinely interested in. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make the video. I don't care if anyone watches. This is just something that I want to know. So I remember sitting in my room on Super Bowl Sunday. I'm not a sports guy at all. Just researching domain registrars, buying domains, kind of playing dumb, for lack of a better term, with customer support, going, how do I connect my website with Wix, and seeing what the response was. And even considering things like the dashboard. Was it user friendly? Did they try to upsell me? Would it be clear from a beginner's perspective how I connect my domain with my website? So I released that video, and to my surprise, it was one of the top performing videos on my channel, and it also made the most revenue with AdSense. And part of the reason behind that is because AdSense is not just dependent on views. There's also something called a CPM, which stands for cost per thousand. If you're in marketing, you're probably familiar with this term. But the CPM that you make, the revenue per thousand views from Google Ads, is completely different depending on the niche, and that's because it's all bid based. So companies that want to get in front of this type of audience who's researching where to buy a domain, honestly, GoDaddy is probably advertising on this video, or Bluehost, and those types of companies are willing to pay a lot more money per thousand views to reach this audience than they would an iPhone review or a vlog or something maybe a bit more generic. So that explains the ad revenue bump. But 2019, this was a pivotal moment in my creator journey. I was in the same situation as I was in 2017, where I thought, a VPN comparison, it's kind of interesting to me. I keep seeing all these ads for ExpressVPN and Surfshark and NordVPN, and I want to know which one is really best. But I had that same sort of thought as with the domain video. Is this really relevant? I had sort of pivoted. I was still doing a little bit of tech content, a little bit of SaaS content. Are my viewers really going to care about where to buy a VPN? But I had the same exact feeling of, this is a passion project. I need to know. I just want to make this video, put it out there, see what it does. And again, wouldn't you know it, it was one of my best performing videos on the channel. Actually, to this day, this is my number one performing video on my channel, all-time views. And the ad revenue was about average, but what shocked me was the affiliate revenue. I made 6 figures of affiliate revenue from this video alone. And this is the video that allowed me to go full time on YouTube. And this was kind of right during the COVID lockdown era. Not a fun time in the world, but a lot of people were working from home, needing to buy a VPN. So it was sort of being in the right place at the right time. And I was convinced that I won the lottery, that this video made it big. I got lucky with my timing with COVID. And when everything reopened and everything went back to normal, my channel was just going to die. But to my surprise, here we are 5 years later. Here's my last video that I published. And I am still able to do this full time through sponsorships, affiliate revenue, and the YouTube ads. But one thing I noticed is that these comparison videos lead to a lot of conversions. So let's go to our next slide here. Let's talk about today's roadmap. So I want to cover what makes content convert, storytelling for products. That's important. You got to hold people's attention while they're watching your videos, or they're going to tune out. Some platform specific tactics for YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Now, I'm a video content creator, so most of my platform specific advice is going to be video oriented. However, I did get some feedback for this talk at Color Code. I gave a disclaimer there saying, hey, everyone, just so you know, I'm a video creator, so I don't know that this will be applicable to blogging. But there was a blogging expert watching who came up to me after my talk and said, hey, by the way, just want to let you know, everything you shared is absolutely applicable to blogging. We're seeing the same pivot happening in blogging right now. So there you go. Platform specific tactics are going to be for video, but this may apply to blogging as well. We're also going to talk about building trust and community, because that's important for sustaining the strategy long term. And then I'll touch on some common mistakes, some pitfalls to avoid. Okay, so here's what I noticed about content that converts. We have this conversion triangle. You need to trigger these 3 key emotions to lead to a conversion moment. You start with trust. If the person doesn't trust you, they're not going to watch your content, or they're going to click away quick, and that's it. You've lost the conversion. Once you establish that trust, you need them to be curious, intrigued by what you're sharing. And this is one of the reasons I like comparisons so much, is it is intriguing. People want to know. If they click a video about where to buy a domain, maybe they're vaguely interested, and as they watch, they think, "Yeah, what is the best dashboard for where to buy a domain?" Or "Who does have the best customer service?" You pique their interest, and then they wanna keep watching. And finally, you trigger the emotion of aspiration. You show the viewer what success could look like, and they become inspired to go with your recommendation, solve that problem in their business, and take things to the next level. So, this is one thing that I had to learn early on in my journey, especially when you're creating content optimized for conversions. The audience intentions matter. I see a lot of software creators focusing on tutorials, and that's good. I think you should still make that content because it's helpful for your customers. But notice what I just said, it's helpful for your customers. Tutorials are typically for that post purchase audience. They've already converted, they've purchased your product, they're looking for help. This may be helpful for retention if you're doing SaaS. This may also be helpful to upsell them to a higher plan or a new product, getting them to move up the ladder. But tutorials are most likely not going to be top of funnel content. Same thing for the research phase, the tire kickers. That type of audience is not going to convert. So, what you should focus on for conversions is the comparison phase, people evaluating the best option if you have competitors, and the decision phase, people who are ready to purchase, they're looking for validation. I would argue that both of these are more or less comparison content. It's just whether someone is still researching or they're ready to buy, and they're honestly looking for someone to affirm their decision and see that you reached the same conclusion in your comparison video as they did in their research. So let's talk about some trust barriers for product owners, because I won't sugarcoat it. This is a significant challenge that you're going to face. One of the benefits that I have as an independent content creator is I don't own a product or service that I'm selling. So I sort of have that built in trust of not being biased. You, as a product owner, you're going to face a little bit of an uphill battle when you're promoting your own product. Viewers are very skeptical of self promotion, and they detect bias in comparisons. They're also going to question your credibility right away. So, one of the solutions that I would recommend here is be radically transparent. Point out the flaws in your own product. Say who it's for and who it's not. Because if someone sees, wait a minute, this guy is the product owner, but he's pointing out the flaws in his own product, that's going to go a long way to building trust. Also, one thing that you could play around with, I have here, create a separate content brand. Now, this one's a little interesting. I come across a lot of blogs for products, and maybe it's a comparison article. And then at the end of the article, they're like, or you could use our solution. And I'm like, oh, was the entire article biased? That breaks my trust. So I would recommend exploring creating a separate brand for your content that's not the same as your brand name. Now, you can still disclose ownership, and you should, in the spirit of transparency. I like thinking of this from a journalism angle, but having a separate brand will allow people to build enough trust momentarily. And then when they learn that it's owned by your same brand, that may break the trust, but I still think it removes that distraction. That's what I would say. Is it removes that distraction up front. It allows them to just see your content, that you're being honest, you're pointing out the pros and cons of everything. Then they learn, hey, by the way, this content brand is owned by this brand. Okay. Hopefully you've already built that trust and they're willing to hear you out and try your product. Let's talk about how comparisons spark curiosity. There's a couple things here. You can showcase competitive differences, answer research questions, what people are thinking when they're evaluating the different options, and give a human opinion. This is another thing that I want to stress. Don't do the cop out of saying there is no winner. It depends on whatever you prefer. People are watching a comparison because they want to know your opinion. So give it to them. Now, I do nuance this in my own comparisons. There's often not one winner. I usually will try to pick a best overall, the most well rounded option, but I may also do the best value option or the best advanced option. And that's fine. You can do categories and you can be nuanced, but give people a clear answer of these are the ones that are best for these use cases. These are the ones that you should avoid. I can't stand when I watch a comparison. I get to the end and the conclusion is there is none. You decide. It's a cop out. Please don't do that. So, how can you build aspiration? Because remember, there's the three key emotions we want to trigger. There's trust, curiosity, and aspiration. So, we've built the trust, we've got them curious. Now we need them to feel inspired and empowered to implement the solution in their own business. Well, the user is feeling overwhelmed, and we want to simplify that for them as much as possible through the comparison content. You could also use some tutorial content to push that user over the edge, showing them, look, my product is actually simple to use. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. Clarity, that's kind of what I just described. You're wanting to help them see that it's not as complicated as they first realized. And then success, showing the user what they can achieve with your product. I like to call this the anti sales approach. You want to educate the user, not sell them. You want to acknowledge the limitations. I touched on this earlier, but I think it bears repeating. Be honest about the flaws of your product and define the ideal users clearly. If you're just saying everything that your product does and all the ways it's great, people are going to be skeptical. And show, don't tell, demonstrate actual usage, and let the results speak for themselves. Now let's cover some storytelling for products. This is important to hold someone's attention. I use the word cutthroat a lot to describe content creation and retention, and it's dark, but it's true. It's a cutthroat business. You have to always be engaging or you're going to lose people. If you're making a 10-minute long comparison, it better be interesting the whole time, otherwise people will check out. Now the reality is people are going to check out. On YouTube, it's common to have 25 to 30% retention. I would say 30% retention is about average. If you're getting more than that, that's incredible. You're doing something right. If you're getting less than that, maybe you want to tweak your content a little bit and aim for around 30%. But going over some storytelling here, we want to introduce the problem, relate to the viewer's pain point, position your product as the guide, not the hero. We're going to get more into that in the next slide, but that's very important to remember. Establish credibility, show proof that your solution works, and then depict the outcome, visualize the viewer's success, help them see what they're going to achieve with your product. Now, let's talk about customers as the hero and the product as the guide. This is the number one mistake that founders make when making product content. I call this the technical trap. Founders overemphasize features and they make the product the hero. So I have worked with brands over the years that say, hey, we really like the video, but can you revise the script and tell the viewer that our product has 99.9% uptime or this technical feature or that technical feature? And I'll say, sure, you're the client, happy to do whatever you would like. But I want to give the caveat here that the user probably doesn't care about all these technical features at this point in their journey. And that's because you're trying to make your product the hero that has all the tools that can solve all your problems. Think of the customer as the hero. They're the ones wanting to achieve success and level up and save the world through their business or their journey. And your product is simply a guide that helps them get there. When you frame it that way, the product simply becomes a tool that solves a pain point, and you just need to tell the users enough to make them go, okay, this is a product to solve my pain point, or this is the product to help me with my aspirations. Once they convert, you can then elaborate and say, hey, maybe through a welcome series, an email series, or a guided experience the first time they log into the dashboard, that's the time to say, by the way, were you aware of this feature or this feature? Because I think that could help with retention, not necessarily going to help get them in the door. So don't fall into the technical trap. Work on that narrative shift. Your product is the guide, not the hero. You can also showcase real customer wins. That is a great way to brag on your product without making it the hero. You're making all of your customers the hero and saying, look what our customers achieved using our product as the guide. Look at how our customers became heroes. You're a hero too. So let our product help solve that issue for you as well. All right, so let's get into some platform specific tips here. For YouTube, I touched on this earlier. Very cutthroat, skip the fluff and get to the point immediately. Gone are the days of the 30-second intro where you do the video or you say, hey guys, welcome back to my channel, like and subscribe. If you do that, you're going to lose people. Remember the 30% retention tactic. Also, another thing that I want to touch on, well, I'm going to get ahead of myself. That's point 4 here, but we'll just skip to point 4 and then I'll go backwards. Speaking of retention, YouTube values the number of minutes watched more than they do the percentage. So I know I just touched on the percentage, aiming for 30%. That's still a general indicator of if your videos are engaging enough or not. However, there's also something to be said for the minutes of watch time that you have. So some people think if I make a 3-minute video and it gets 50% retention, that's amazing. Well, that's a minute and a half of watch time for that 50% retention. Now, if you make a 10-minute video and you're getting 30% retention, yes, that percentage is lower, 30% versus 50%, but 30% of 10 minutes is 3 minutes. And at the end of the day, the thing YouTube values most and the thing that will encourage YouTube to push your video out to more viewers is the number of minutes watched. So in that scenario, the person watching 3 minutes of a 10-minute video is going to reward your channel more than watching a minute and a half of a 3-minute video. So optimize for watch time, make longer videos if possible, but make sure they're engaging. Don't add fluff just to make it longer. Now, going back, sorry, did that out of order here. Compelling hook, you want to capture attention in the first 15 seconds of the video. I call this my cold open. I'll often share a little teaser of the results of the video, or maybe you can share your controversial hot take right at the beginning, draw people in, make them realize, oh, I want to stick around. This is interesting. You're sparking curiosity. You also want to have a clear call to action. You can remind people that all the product links are in the description if you're doing a comparison. You also have to ask for subscribers. And ideally, you want to do this within the first few minutes within that 30% retention window when most people are still going to be watching. I say this because as a viewer of YouTube myself, I don't often subscribe to channels that I like unless I'm asked. And that's simply because I don't think about it. The YouTube algorithm is so good at putting the right content in front of people. And if I watch a channel consistently, it's going to keep giving me that person's videos, even if I'm not a subscriber. So you may ask, are subscribers even important anymore? Yes, they are, because it's still a vanity metric that people look at to gauge how trustworthy you are. If they click your channel, you're talking about your product, and you have 50,000 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers, they're going to think, oh, okay, this company's trustworthy, they're credible, they've already built a community. So while subscribers aren't important for someone seeing your content again and again, if they're engaged and they keep clicking it, they are important for that vanity metric. So it's still something I would recommend asking for. All right, let's talk Instagram. Now, I'll give the disclaimer that YouTube is my expertise. It's where I've achieved most of my success, but I do post a little bit to Instagram and TikTok as well. And one thing I want to point out about Instagram is it's more about a visual first experience. It's about the aesthetic. People open Instagram to either catch up with their friends and watch the stories or mindlessly scroll and look for inspiration, vibes, just visually stimulating things as they scroll their feed. So often you want story driven captions. I would highly recommend using an app to add captions to your short form clips. I use one called the Captions app. It's a terrible name, but it's captions.app, I believe. Or if you go to the App Store or Play Store and you just search captions, you'll find it that way. But I would recommend adding those moving captions. I can just hear Michelle in the background commenting on accessibility here. There may be ways to make it more accessible. I want to clarify, captions period are very accessible, but the flashy ones on the screen maybe not the most accessible way of doing it. But the captions app gives you lots of options. You can make it where it just shows one sentence at a time if you like, and captions in general are going to improve accessibility. Consistency over perfection. This matters on all platforms. And one thing I want to share is it's more important to be consistent with your upload schedule than say, I have to post daily or I have to post weekly. There are some creators on YouTube that post once a month because their videos are so high effort that it takes a month to go through the production process. That's all they're able to sustain. And it's fine because they're posting consistently every month. So whether you decide to post monthly, weekly, daily or 3 times a week, just be consistent in that schedule you pick. For Instagram, I would say ideally you want to post 2 to 3 times a week. For YouTube, ideally once a week. TikTok, same as Instagram, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. TikTok may move a little bit faster. But the point is, don't get wrapped up in how frequently you post. If you can only post once a month or once a week, that's fine. Just be consistent with that schedule that you create. Also, strategic hashtags, they do still matter on Instagram. Hashtags have become less important over the years, I feel, but it's still a factor and something I would encourage on Instagram and TikTok. Now, speaking of TikTok, there is more emphasis in trend participation on TikTok. Going after the trendy sounds, the skits. I promise you do not have to do cringe dances unless you want to. You can still do dancing trends, that's fine, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I resisted TikTok for several years. I wish I had joined it sooner, but I was like, don't want to do dancing content. That's just not my thing, so I'm not going to join this TikTok app. I sound so old. But eventually I realized, hey, this is a way that I could expand my business. I could reach a broader audience. I probably should be on TikTok. And that's when I realized the trends are much more than just the dances. There's sounds that you can use, there's skit formats that you can adapt. And believe it or not, the trends, surprisingly, are the TikToks that have done the best for me. And they're also the most fun to create. So play around with it. You can also just share educational content, though. There is an audience on TikTok that wants to learn about tech products and software. Also, oh, sorry, I'm just seeing a Mark Westgard in the chat. I'm all in on cringe dancing. Nice. That's Mark, let's see a WS form TikTok, or maybe you already have one. I would love to see some WS form dances. Raw authenticity, that matters as well on TikTok. I would argue that matters on all of these platforms, but TikTok especially, people want to feel that human connection. TikTok is even more cutthroat than YouTube when it comes to retention. People want the hook in seconds. 3 seconds or less, you have to capture someone's attention when they're just scrolling quickly. It's that split second decision of whether you sparked curiosity or not. You also can experiment with loop worthy content that helps with retention if the user is watching it 2 or 2.5 times before they scroll, and that helps the content go out to more people. This is a graph or chart or table. That's the word. This is a table that I asked ChatGPT to generate as I was working on my notes, and I found it pretty helpful. So maybe something that you want to screenshot, or I will have a link to the slides at the end of the presentation. But this sort of helps me compartmentalize how the different platforms are unique from each other, and it can help inform your content strategy as you're planning for each platform. Now, I know what you may be thinking. This sounds like a lot of work. I don't have a full time team member or even multiple full time team members to handle my social strategy. I don't have time for all of this. I hear you. I am mostly a one-man show, and I will be the first to admit that I don't often do unique content for every platform. So everything I just shared, that's kind of a perfect world scenario. If you could create unique content for TikTok and unique content for Instagram and unique for YouTube/YouTube Shorts, that would be ideal, but many of us don't have the resources to do that yet, and that's okay. There is a cross platform content strategy you can use using a tool called Opus Clips. It's an AI tool that will take your long form YouTube content, cut it up into short, shareable vertical clips between 1 and 3 minutes, add captions, and then you can cross post that to YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and TikTok. This is something that I use all the time. And you can even prompt Opus Clip. You can say, find that part in the video where I talk about XYZ, and it will automatically give you a few different options. So if you're going to focus on one platform, you have the resources just for that, I would focus on YouTube long form content. Use Opus Clips to give you some short form content that you can post to all three platforms. You can also post it to LinkedIn as well. That's another thing I'll add. LinkedIn recently rolled out a vertical video feed. Facebook as well. I mean, there's so many areas that you can repurpose this content, and you might as well because it's another algorithm, another opportunity to reach people. Okay, so once you have the content creation down, you want to build a community. And you can build community through consistency. Post regularly, ask for subscribers and followers, and just be you. I've repeated this a few times throughout this presentation. In fact, everything on this slide I've more or less touched on, but it bears repeating. These are the most important things for product content that converts is to be authentic, be human, give a human opinion, and just be yourself. That's because transparency builds trust. Once again, I'm repeating things, but it's important. Be honest about flaws, show who it's not for. Viewers respect honesty more than perfection or some polished sales pitch. By the way, most of these images in this presentation have been AI generated, so pretty good. There's a couple wild images in here. Sometimes the text gets a little bit wonky, but I thought it would be extra fun to use AI to generate these images and see what it could come up with. So I like to take the personal versus salesy content approach. One of the best pieces of advice I got over the years with delivery to the camera is talk like you're speaking to a friend. Many people they get behind a camera and they just immediately get nervous. They're, oh, I feel so awkward or uncomfortable on camera. Imagine your best friend is the camera lens. How would you talk to them? That's exactly how you should talk to a camera. You don't need to change your talking style just because you're speaking with a camera. Share authentic experiences, focus on customer outcomes. This one's especially easy if you're doing interviews, interviewing your customer about the success they achieved with your product, because then you literally are speaking with a person face to face. Well, through Zoom probably, but you're still speaking with a person interviewing them. Tell stories about real usage. Don't make the salesy mistake of listing all the technical features, overusing the marketing language, hiding product limitations. That's another one. Um, make the product the hero. These slides were also, with the help of AI, created that way. So this probably should be over. No, sorry. The customer is the hero, not the product. I'm misreading my own slide. This is correct. Don't make the product the hero. All right, let's touch on some common mistakes that people make as they are creating product content. They often think, I need an expensive camera, I need expensive lighting. People will come to me and say, I'm starting a channel. Which camera would you recommend? The answer I give them, this camera, your smartphone. If you have a smartphone, and many people do, that's all you need. You don't need a $300 camera to make engaging content. You don't need expensive lighting. Turn on the ceiling lights and put your smartphone on a cheap tripod, and that's good enough. You can also edit using affordable apps. I recommend iMovie for Mac and iPhone. That's free. Filmora is an affordable alternative for Windows and Android. Caveat here, I have not personally used Filmora because I'm an Apple guy, but I've heard great things about it. A lot of content creators who are just starting out use it and like it. DaVinci Resolve is also a free editor that's very powerful, very capable, but it is more advanced. So if you're feeling comfortable with DaVinci and experimenting, that's a great option. Otherwise, Filmora is going to cost a little bit of money, still very affordable and more beginner friendly. So, where should you invest? Now, people can forgive grainy camera footage or bad lighting. They cannot forgive not being able to hear you. If they can't hear you, they're going to bounce. So I would prioritize your audio and consider investing maybe $50 in a USB mic. That is going to be a 10 times better investment than a $300 camera or a $100 light. Invest in your audio first before anything else. And then as you have budget, you're getting an ROI from your product content. Then you can justify investing in a little bit nicer camera, a little bit nicer lighting. I'm not saying you should never buy those things, but you don't have to buy those things to get started with your strategy. Once it pays off, you can then invest a little bit more in equipment. I would also recommend adding captions to your videos because this improves accessibility and SEO. You may be surprised to hear that the YouTube algorithm decides how to rank a video based on the captions more than anything, more than the title, more than the thumbnail, more than the description. People often think they have to stuff all these keywords in the YouTube description. That's not true. It's actually the captions that the algorithm pulls from most to rank your video. So there's a couple reasons I recommend adding manual captions. You may be thinking, "Oh, YouTube auto captions every video, so that's great. That's I've already taken care of that." Hold on. I would recommend adding human-made captions to your video for two reasons. Number one, I don't know if you've ever watched a YouTube video with the auto captions turned on, but it's not great. Words are popping up like as they're spoken. It's a little bit overwhelming to try to follow along. There's no punctuation. It's just not a good experience as a viewer. So by adding human-made captions, you're going to get that same experience you would get on a TV show. They're coming up sentence by sentence. Everything is punctuated. New speakers are notated. That's an FCC guidelines thing that I find particularly helpful when I watch with captions on. There's the little dash to indicate a new speaker. So if you're interviewing someone, that's incredibly helpful. So it makes the experience better for the viewer. I am surprised by this stat, but I checked this morning, I check regularly. 37% of my viewers are watching with captions turned on. And that's especially high on my channel. I was asking some other creators in my niche yesterday what their stats were. They were closer to 20%, and they're not adding manual captions. So I do think that by adding the manual captions, it's leading to a better user experience. And I'm potentially reaching a broader audience who enjoys watching with the captions on, where maybe they would see auto captions on another creator's video and click away sooner. Now, the other reason is that manual captions could improve SEO because I have seen sometimes where the auto captions on YouTube, if you pronounce a word a little bit weird, sometimes they think it's a swear word, even though it's not. And then what does that do in the algorithm if YouTube thinks that your video isn't safe for a broader audience? If you're uploading human-made manual captions that are accurate, you're able to correct those common mistakes or potential pitfalls. I like using rev.com to add captions. They charge $2 a minute for human-made captions. It's a little bit of an investment, but well worth it in my opinion. Okay, another question I get asked all the time is how do I make consistent content? How do I come up with ideas? And I hear you. When I started my content creation journey, I was always just sitting down every week going, "What's the video this week? What's the video?" And it felt like it was a 3-hour brainstorming session to come up with an idea and then rush to create it and get it out, only to repeat that process. Then I started to think of things in terms of content buckets. You start to find the formats that you're comfortable with that are working well on your channel. A couple ideas here: X versus Y, one-on-one comparisons, ultimate comparisons, which I would define as 3+ products, honest reviews, and success stories, interviewing your customers, making your customers the hero in the interviews. And once you find the buckets that work, it becomes much easier to form your content calendar because you could say, okay, this week let's do an X versus Y. Next week, let's do an ultimate comparison. You're no longer scratching your head or beating your head against the desk just to come up with a unique idea every week. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel. Take the content that's working and the formats that are working, make it a little bit different. Maybe you're featuring a different product, slightly different angle, and make that content. So, in summary, I would recommend everyone start with creating one story, one piece of content. Make the customer the hero, not your product. Your product is the guide. Be authentic. Transparency builds trust. And stay consistent. Set a realistic posting schedule that is sustainable. If you can't post weekly, post monthly, but just be consistent in the schedule that you decide on. Here's where to find me. And for the next slide, I will have a QR code on where you can download the slides and we can open up the floor to Q&A.
Fantastic. I've got some questions that we can maybe prime the pump with, if you will.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. So are we still using the word smash? Like smash that subscribe button?
If you want to, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit cringe. I don't know. I do still hear it in videos. I don't personally say smash subscribe, but hey.
So some of the sensational channels, like
For sure,
the Hollywood ones or something like that. What would you say are the barriers to entry? So, like, I'm 56 years old, and the thought of like I could do it, but is it like, am I too old to get started? Are there industries that are like, that just doesn't lend itself? Like, what might be some of the barriers to entry?
I think the main barriers to entry are honestly time. So many of us are busy. I get it. We're wearing multiple hats. We don't have the time to sit down and focus on a content strategy. I don't think it's age. And even Michelle, I know you're a huge advocate for accessibility, which I so appreciate. I've even seen creators that they are nonverbal and they're still able to use captions to express their ideas. So I don't think there's a ton of barriers to entry other than simply having the time.
Yeah.
Also, age, definitely not a barrier to entry. I watched some older creators. I was researching how to file a trademark, and I found a lawyer who was an older woman. Super helpful content. I don't care about age. I just want to know, can I get value out of the content? Are you engaging? I'm a drummer, so there's this famous drummer out there, like Total Grandma. I think she's in her 60s or 70s. I love watching her videos. It's so fun to watch her play drums. So age is definitely not a barrier.
Only in your mind, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Only if you make it be. So you mentioned that like having a smartphone is pretty much all you need to start. I'm a photographer, and when people say what's the best camera, the answer is always the one that's in your hand, right?
Yep.
So like
absolutely
that kind of thing. So for sure, I think it's one of those things where I tell people in podcasting, start with what you have, upgrade your equipment as you can afford to, and as you decide that you want to keep doing what you're doing.
100%. Yes.
I also think imposter syndrome could be something that could come in for a lot of people. Like, oh, I don't look good on camera. Nobody's going to want to listen to me. There's other people that can say it better. But that's not always true. And your perspective is what makes you unique. So even if somebody else is talking, you're not the only person, for example, Taylor, who's talking about tech on YouTube by any stretch of the imagination. But your perspective and your voice is what people enjoy hearing, right?
Yeah, one thing I'll add on that. So I'm over the imposter syndrome with YouTube because I've been doing this for so long, but I still am dealing with imposter syndrome for public speaking. Even like this live stream I shared with Michelle at Color Code. It's like, I have so much imposter syndrome about giving this talk. I got some great advice from a business mentor of mine. Shout out to Justin Wise. But I was talking to him about this, and he said, "You are the content." I was like, just mind blown. When you think of yourself as you being the content, you having a unique perspective to share, You're less intimidated by imposter syndrome. And also, as I shared earlier, it's not about the spec sheet or regurgitating every fact about your product.
Right.
Honestly, I think people are going to be interested in you as a product founder. They're going to find you intriguing and your story, and that's going to lead that curiosity spark on them wanting to know more about your product.
Absolutely. Now, when we talk about social media in general, we talk about like an 80-20, 90-10 type rule where 80 to 90% of your content should be entertaining and educational, and only other 10 to 20% should be marketing and trying to sell something. It sounds like that's kind of what you were talking about too. And make sure you're providing value as opposed to buy my whatever.
Absolutely. And I would take that one step further. Maybe this is what you meant by it, but I wouldn't even say like 80% of your posts should be educational and 20% should try to sell people. I would sort of blend that and say every post should be educational or entertaining. And within that post, only 10 to 20% of it should be a call to
Mm,
action where you try to
yeah,
convert someone.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Live versus pre-recorded. Now, sometimes when events are happening, for example, I will go to YouTube and I'll look for the live link. Like if, especially like, okay, I am a little bit older, so like funerals, things like that, or there's a volcano erupting, or those kinds of things. I'll look for a live. I don't tend to look for lives for people who do like what you do, but have you done lives? Have you found that to be beneficial in any way?
I've done a little bit of live streaming, experimented with it. I find that live streams are only helpful if you have a strong, loyal community who wants to ask questions regularly. A lot of my
Mm-hmm.
content is targeting search. So it's people that are researching a problem. They come in, they see a comparison, they get what they need, they bounce. 97% of my views come from people who are not subscribed. So for me, when I go live, I get maybe 50 people watching, not a ton of interaction in the chat. And that's like I'm okay with that because I know what my goals are with my content.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a very strong community that they want to have that interaction, live could be great. But someone at Color Coded asked, sort of, should I use live streams as a way to get content out quicker? And I was encouraging him to change the way he looked at it and see live streams as a way to engage with your community rather than a way to sort of make content easier. Because if that's your mindset, you probably need to simplify your production process.
That makes
So,
sense.
live streaming, great for engagement, connecting with your community live, pre recorded, allows you to do a little bit more editing, polish it a bit more. Also, I think pre-recorded is a bit easier if you have imposter syndrome. It allows you to ease into things. You can edit if you mess up, whereas live things can be kind of awkward if you
Yeah.
lose your train of thought, which I do all the time.
I will say though that live on TikTok is a very different game than live on YouTube.
That is true.
And
I've never experimented with that, so that's interesting.
yeah, so a lot of people are selling things like, "Hey, do you want to buy this shirt?" The next person kind of thing. And so on TikTok, for example, and TikTok is a much more a TikTok shop. Like it's a shopping experience, right? So they're actually taking TikTok and turning it from just experiencing video to every other video is trying to sell you something like a Temu or a Shein kind of thing. So it's very different.
Yeah,
So
it's like a
if
QVC, but
it
for
is, yeah.
Gen Z.
Yeah, exactly. So experiment with both if you have, one type of content versus another. And then my last comment to you was that I love captions. If you're going to embed your video on your website as well, include a transcript, because the transcript is actually going to pull SEO and be readable on your website versus just captions if you're embedding it. So I just wanted to add that little caveat to that as well.
Yeah, that is so helpful. I've honestly never considered that because YouTube is my expertise. So with
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, the algorithm looks at the captions because it's all in-house. It's like the algorithm has access to that. But that makes
Mm-hmm.
total sense if you're embedding
Yeah.
it on a blog.
Yeah. So that way you've got that SEO too. So I want to thank you. Let's see. Dave just said, it took a lot of courage to start publishing content with his face. I agree. And also says that age is not a barrier. I love to hear that. Mark Westgard says, thank you for this talk. It couldn't have come at a better time for him. So, Mark,
You're
we're going to get you on here next week showing us the latest dances that you've learned. Okay, not really.
Love it.
But Christian,
Mark,
thank you so much.
I was going to say, Mark, we should record a TikTok dance in WordCamp Europe. Oh, Michelle, yeah, you'll be there too.
I'll be there too. We can have a whole thing.
We should all do a TikTok dance, and then next time I give this talk, I'll add a slide, a little GIF with the dance.
Yeah, with the dance. Oh, that's so funny. Thank you so much for being here today. Hang on for a minute. This wraps up because I just have a few notes for you when we finish. Sure. But thank you everybody else who's been watching today and those who are watching in the future, because of course this will live forever, or as long as YouTube survives.
That's depressing.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean? Like eventually it's going to be replaced by something. They always are. Okay, we'll see everybody next time. Thanks again, Christian. And one of the